We have a secret weapon which we can use better than guns and machine guns, and this is time. As long as we do not make peace with the Zionists, the war is not over. And as long as the war is not over, there is neither victor nor vanquished. These words were uttered by Azam Pasha, the first Secretary General of the Arab League soon after the Israeli victory in the First Arab-Israel War. Azam Pasha's words depicted the Arab refusal to accept defeat and the state of Israel. This attitude ensured that the Palestine cause would live on. Logically, it followed that conflict and war would continue for the foreseeable future as well. The Arab defeat in the First Arab-Israel War gave birth to many more wars in the same way the Muslim defeat in the First Crusade led to more than a dozen crusades spanning a time period of more than 180 years. I am Dr. Hassan Bukhari, and this is the 13th episode of our series Palestine versus Israel. In the last episode, we had discussed that Israel had practically killed an independent state of Palestine before it was even born. After the war, Israel ruled over 80% of Palestine with a huge Jewish majority due to the successful genocide of the indigenous Palestinian population living there. But Israel felt far from secure. A Jewish island in an Arab sea, not only did it want to defend itself, but it also wanted to further expand. That is why Israel didn't even promulgate a written constitution, for a written constitution would have to define and identify the borders of the state of Israel. So it wasn't surprising at all when Israel transformed itself into a militaristic state from the start. Not content with just raising a professional army, the Israeli parliament enacted a comprehensive defense service law in September 1949 that established the legal foundation of Israel's citizen army. Subject to this law, almost all of Israel's population was obliged to provide compulsory military service for many years. Ben-Gurion envisioned the Israeli Defense Force as much more than just a vehicle for the country's defense. He wanted the armed forces to serve as a tool for national education and social cohesion as well. The primary function of the defense forces has been to safeguard the state. However, this is not its sole function. The army must also serve as an educational and pioneering center for Israeli youth, for both those born here and newcomers. It is the duty of the army to educate a pioneer generation, healthy in body and spirit, courageous and loyal, which will unite the broken tribes and diasporas to prepare themselves to fulfill the historic tasks of the State of Israel through self-realization. This citizen army of Israel ingrained another core value as well: aggression. From day one, the Israeli army engaged in deliberate provocations. This aggressive behavior was encouraged by the first Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, but it further received a huge boost in 1953 when Moshe Dayan was appointed as Chief of General Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces. Dayan created a special unit known as Unit 101 under the command of Colonel Ariel Sharon to conduct punitive raids on the Arab border villages. One of the most famous of these raids, for which the UN censured Israel as well, involved the Jordanian village of Qibya. The village was utterly destroyed by Sharon, and more than 50 civilians were mercilessly massacred in retaliation of a Palestinian guerrilla raid in which 3 Israelis were killed. This sort of disproportionate response was a cornerstone of Dayan's security philosophy, as it served 2 purposes. Number 1, it was thought that such savagery would deter the Arabs and convince the Arab governments to control their borders more stringently. But more importantly, for Dayan, such actions were necessary to maintain a level of tension and combat spirit in the Israeli nation. In Dayan's words, without these actions, we would have ceased to be a combative people, and without the discipline of a combative people, we are lost. By the mid-1950s, Israel had honed its military machine and had demonstrated its military superiority over its Arab neighbors through frequent and increasingly vicious raids. Now, Ben-Gurion and Dayan wanted a full-scale war to smash one or more of their Arab neighbors and expand the borders of Israel. Indeed, Ben-Gurion once loudly blurted out that it would be worthwhile to pay an Arab £1 million to start a war. On the Arab side, the aftermath of the First Arab-Israel War had shattered the belief of the people in their governments. Syria underwent 3 coups in 5 years. Jordan's King Abdullah was assassinated and his successor Talal was forced to abdicate, ostensibly on medical grounds. But the most significant developments took place in Egypt. Gamal Abdel Nasser, a hero of the First Arab-Israel War, had said soon after the war, "We were convinced that the real enemy was in Cairo." Nasser founded a group within the army called the Free Officers in 1949. The Free Officers established an alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood movement in Egypt and bided their time. In January 1952, violence erupted in the Suez Canal zone, which was under British military occupation. Mobs attacked foreigners, particularly the British. The British retaliated with vigor and killed dozens of Egyptian policemen. This led to an outbreak of violence against foreigners in Cairo as well. King Farouk of Egypt was widely believed to be a stooge of the British, and resentment against him exponentially multiplied. The Free Officers sensed the opportunity and recruited General Najib, probably the most famous Egyptian hero of the 1948 war, as a figurehead. On 23 July 1952, the Free Officers struck and ousted King Farouk. Within 2 years, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser managed to neutralize the Muslim Brotherhood and oust Najib to become the dictator of Egypt. In the beginning, Nasser wanted to cultivate good relations with the West, especially the USA. He was apprehensive of communism and wanted to focus on the economic development of Egypt. The USA was also interested in recruiting Egypt as an ally against communism, and some American aid did find its way to Egypt. Nasser also was much more focused on removing British power from Egypt rather than on confronting Israel. After protracted negotiations, Nasser gained an agreement with Britain in October 1954. According to this agreement, British troops in Egypt were to leave Egypt within 20 months. Only 1,200 civilian contractors would remain on the Suez Canal basis for 7 years. Nasser also engaged in secret peace negotiations with Moshe Sharat, who had replaced Ben-Gurion as the Israeli PM in late 1953. But the Israeli military establishment under Dayan undermined Sharat, and Ben-Gurion's return in 1955 doomed the effort completely due to increased Israeli belligerence. Ben-Gurion's mindset can be explained by an interesting episode narrated in the book Cutting the Lion's Tail by Muhammad Hackle. In December 1953, British Labour politician Richard Crossman told Nasser he had been to see Ben-Gurion and had told him that the Egyptians didn't want a war because they wanted to concentrate on developing their country. Ben-Gurion began scratching his head and then said, "Dick, this is the worst news I have ever heard." He meant that a properly developed Egypt would be more than a match for Israel. On February 28, 1955, Ben-Gurion forced Nasser to wake up and smell the coffee. A savage Israeli attack on Egyptian forces in Gaza left 38 Egyptian soldiers killed and dozens more wounded. The raid was intended to demonstrate Israeli overwhelming military superiority to Gamal Abdel Nasser. In the words of Muhammad Hackle, the raid was intended as a message from Ben-Gurion to Nasser, and Nasser understood the message. Israel tried to justify this raid as a reprisal for Egyptian-sponsored Palestinian guerrilla activity from Gaza, but this was baseless. According to Charles Smith, Egyptian and Israeli documents indicate it is difficult to connect the Israeli raid with the activity of infiltration because the Israeli action came precisely during a period of relative calm in that area and in the wake of major efforts on the part of the Egyptian regime to stop infiltrations in the Gaza Strip. Israeli provocations only intensified from then on, and another vicious raid on Khan Yunis in Gaza Strip in August 1955 left 39 dead. Nasser, intent on avoiding war, offered that both Egypt and Israel establish 100 meters wide demilitarized zones on Gaza Strip's border. When Israel refused, Nasser unilaterally established the demilitarized zone on the Arab side. However, Israel's behavior was clear enough for Nasser to realize that he must have the power to deter Israel in order to attain peace. In Haeckel's words, Nasser realized that if things went on as they had been going, he would find that he had developed Egypt only to hand it over to the Israelis. As a retaliatory measure, Nasser completely closed the Straits of Tiran for all ships bound for the Israeli Red Sea port of Eilat. But a more important change in policy after the Israeli raid of February was a vigorous quest for arms. Nasser first tried to secure arms from the Americans, but the Americans attached many conditions on arms sales and Nasser refused to be restrained by them. Only then did Nasser turn towards the Soviet Union for arms and found them willing to supply arms on generous terms without preconditions. In September 1955, Nasser announced the finalization of a huge arms deal with Czechoslovakia. It was apparent to everybody that Czechoslovakia was merely acting as a conduit for Soviet arms. Some Jewish historians have blamed Nasser for starting an arms race with Israel. They assert that Israel only started massive imports of arms after Nasser's deal with the Soviets. This is a transparent lie. Israel had been vigorously pursuing large arms deals since its inception, but the USA didn't oblige as it thought that Israeli military power already dwarfed its neighbors. But Israel found an arms supplier in France, and in August 1954, more than a year before Nasser's arms deal, concluded a large deal with France. This deal was negotiated by Shimon Peres, a future Prime Minister and President of Israel who was working as Ben-Gurion's deputy at the Defense Ministry then. France supplied Oregon jets, tanks, artillery pieces and modern radar to Israel under this deal. Then, a year later, Israel and France inked a still larger arms deal in November 1955, with France supplying technologically advanced Mystère II jets to the Israeli Air Force, in addition to more tanks and artillery guns. In 1954 and 55, the USA tried to bring peace to the Middle East and bring Egypt into its orbit through an effort named Project Alpha. Robert Anderson, a future Treasury Secretary of the USA, headed this project and met Nasser and Ben-Gurion several times. Project Alpha envisaged a settlement of the Palestinian refugee problem to be financed by the United States, with some refugees returning to Israel, but most resettled in Arab countries. It also foresaw a land link between Egypt and Jordan through the Negev desert, while still leaving the Negev in Israel's hands, and removal of Egyptian restrictions on Israeli shipping through the Suez Canal. Peace agreements between Israel, Syria and Jordan would be encouraged by an economic development plan for the Jordan River Valley. Ultimately, Project Alpha failed because of Ben-Gurion's unbending refusal to accept any refugees or cede an inch of territory, and Nasser's resentment over the linkage of any aid to Egypt with its positive response to Project Alpha. Despite the failure of Project Alpha, there were some promising signs in the USA-Egypt relations. The USA and the UK seemed willing to invest in a project very close to President Nasser's heart. the Aswan High Dam project. According to Henry Kissinger, Great Britain and the United States believed that their financial support for Aswan Dam would make Egypt financially dependent on them in much the same way that the building of the Suez Canal had given the West financial control over Egypt in the 19th century. On 16 December 1955, the US and British governments, along with the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, a component of the World Bank Group, publicly announced that they were going to help Egypt in financing the dam. Initially, the USA pledged to provide $56 million, while the UK promised $14 million. Pointing caustically towards Egypt's arms deals with the Soviets, US Secretary of State John Foster Dulles commented, "Russia is helping you in death, but we are going to help you in life." In June 1956, the last British troops left Egypt. For the first time since 1882, Egypt gained true sovereignty. Nasser duly assumed the office of president on 25 June after winning a plebiscite. Almost 6 months had passed since the US announcement for funds for the Aswan Dam project, but no money had actually been dispersed or even earmarked by the US Congress. Instead, the US started to demand that Egypt first fulfill some financial conditions to justify the viability of the project. Nasser was irked by this and he appeared reluctant to comply. In July, Ahmed Hussein, the Egyptian ambassador to the USA, met Nasser and expressed alarm at the US behavior. He said that something must be done quickly to save the dam project. Nasser laughed and said, "Wake up, doctor, there is no dam." When Hussein tried to argue, Nasser said, "I can prove you are wrong. Go and see Dulles and tell him that I have accepted all the conditions he made." Hussein said, "If I told him this, he wouldn't believe me." He asked for it to be put in writing, so Nasser took a piece of paper and wrote on it that Egypt accepted all the outstanding conditions relating to finance for the high dam and was ready to sign accordingly. Interestingly, Dulles was himself hoping that Nasser's failure to comply with the US conditions will result in the dam project dying a natural death. The US had soured on the dam project because it had perceived no change in Egypt's independent stance after the announcement of aid. The Israeli lobby in the US was also trying very hard to scuttle any US cooperation with Egypt. So, Dulles decided to ditch Egypt, but he wanted to place the blame for the rupture on Egypt as well. Nasser cleverly called the US bluff and foiled this design. So, on 18 July, when Ahmed Hussein informed Dulles of Nasser's acceptance of all US conditions, Dulles had no option but to come out in the open and announce that the US wouldn't be giving a dime to Egypt. Interestingly, instead of uttering this refusal in a polite way, Dulles chose to do this in an aide-memoire whose language was deliberately insulting. Dulles probably did this to take revenge for the Egyptian recognition of the People's Republic of China, which was a pariah state in US eyes then. Thus, not only did the US leave Egypt in the lurch, but also managed to add insult to injury. In the words of the American head of the IBRD, Eugene Black, "It was the greatest disappointment of my professional life. It was a classic case where long-term policy was sacrificed because of short-term problems and irritations, and war came shortly after." Nasser had expected the rejection but hadn't anticipated the accompanying insult. He decided to respond to this outrage. The method he chose would not only avenge the insult but also assert the newly won Egyptian sovereignty. He chose to nationalize the Suez Canal. In 1855, a concession for the construction of the Suez Canal had been awarded by the Egyptian king to a French engineer, Ferdinand de Lesseps. The canal opened in 1869 and was jointly owned by Egypt and France. In 1875, the British bought out about half the shares of the canal company from King Ismail of Egypt for £4 million. The Canal Company soon after became a state within the state under French and British control. In the Canal Zone, the Egyptian government had no writ, and most of the directors of the company were British and French. For many decades, the Canal Company had stung the Egyptians as a usurper of their land and authority. The original concession was set to expire in 1968, but Nasser jumped the gun and promptly nationalized the canal on 26 July 1956. This move proved wildly popular in Egypt. The Soviet Union and China also expressed their support. But predictably, the nationalization of Suez Canal put Egypt on the path to war with Britain and France. Nasser, to his credit, did pay the shareholders and fulfilled all the international obligations regarding the canal. But these gestures caused exasperation to the British, French, and Israelis who wanted war to achieve their nefarious designs. In the next episode of Palestine versus Israel, we will discuss the Suez Crisis and the 1956 war between Egypt and the tripartite alliance of Israel, Britain, and France. Stay tuned. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.